It's time for Ask the Mayor with Beatrice Mayor Bob Morgan. If you have a call today, 402 question for the mayor, 402-228-5923. Dave asked me to ask you, do you believe in groundhog forecasting for weather or not?
Yes, I think I do. After 65 years of living here, yeah.
Yeah. 6 more weeks of winter, apparently. So.
Well, okay. Let's just get it over with.
Yeah, really. By calendar, that's about what we got anyway. We might as well put up with it. So that was the prognostication this morning from...
Well, I kind of like that. Was an easy question. Are we done?
Yeah, we're done. Easy weather. 50% of the time, that's all you have to be to do forecasting and things like that. Talk about several things today. Maybe just kind of follow up on when you had your goal-setting session recently. You talked about you were wanting to meet one-on-one with each council members following that, just to kind of get where everybody's thinking is, where they're headed. Has that started already?
I've met with 2 so far. Mm-hmm. I'm sure we will as we go along in the year. I think the hardest thing that we got to keep in mind is that Rome wasn't built in a day. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the items that were on the goals are going to take some time. We've got a number of years, well, at least in my term, we've got about 4 years to see what we could get accomplished. And so I think the shining star was I was overall very, very happy with the participation from the council. I think they were well thought out. I mean, I think from either the campaign trail or from what we've talked about for the last 4 or 5 years, we knew that Dempster's was going to be on there. Mm-hmm. We knew the reroute of 136 was going to be on there. Infrastructure, needs to be on there all the time. And then, I think some of the recreational and trails are really good goals to put on there. I think if in these 4 years we can kind of set the planning and the guidance and help figure out where the money will come from, I think those are all major projects that can help move Beatrice forward. And we all know they need done. It's now a matter of how do you put in place a solid plan so that in the next 4 years it can be accomplished. I think we'll get some of these accomplished this 4-year term, but we also have to be realistic. And, as I was talking to one councilman, what is really important is, though, that we put in a good plan in place and start building the steps to get it done so that if we don't get it done, at least somebody will know where to pick up and move forward.
Speaking of planning, you received notice this week of a planning grant through the U.S. DOT. This gets back to the laws passed on infrastructure across the United States where they're going to, the U.S. DOT is going to provide grant funding to the city, but it's to do planning for projects that you could then be eligible, as I understand, for grants later on. How much of that, you do a lot of planning anyway, the way it is, and between the street department, city engineer, as far as a 1 and 6 year plan and things like that. How much do you have to kind of, add on top of that to then be eligible?
Well, there certainly is a number of requirements in that infrastructure. We have been planning. I mean, the Board of Public Works and Tobias working with Jason and working with James Burrows, we've really got a lot of stuff done. And we've seen some examples of kind of what DOT wants on these Safe Streets and Roads Act. The amazing thing that I found is that, we have to spend $200,000 to put together a plan that fits exactly what they want before we can even apply for some major funding that could really help us move a number of projects forward. So, it's one of those things. It's an 80-20 grant. So, we'll pay $20,000 of that or $200,000. They'll pay $180,000. It's in some respects, I wish they would have come and said, "Would you just submit your plan?"
Yeah.
And that would have saved the federal government money, and it would save Beatrice money. But that's not the rules of this particular grant. So, we'll put a pretty good. I think, with the crew that we have between the BPW and Tobias, we will put together a very, very thorough and thought-out plan that has, I would hope, some real chance of success.
Seems like the main factor is safety, both pedestrian and traffic safety in this program, but I would imagine isn't that a consideration anyway when you go about, planning for, either repairing or refurbishing roads or building new ones? I mean, that factors in most of the time without saying, doesn't it?
It does. I mean, and just to give you a perfect example, when we put together the master plan out at the college, one of the things that was an impetus is to try to move parking away from the main roads that are pedestrian areas where students would walk. You know, it's not. I think we now take a focus of how do we design streets and roads that also are pedestrian friendly and bike path friendly and all the modes of transportation that are really popular that may or may not be motorized.
You have other grant applications from time to time pending. I don't know how many there are, but just briefly speaking with Tobias yesterday, he said there's a bunch of them out there where you're kind of waiting on various programs or announcements as to whether or not you'll have money forthcoming. Is there 4 or 5, half dozen? What can you say?
I think we've kept Tobias and Taylor very busy writing grants. I'm thinking we're probably at least in the half a dozen area, or half a dozens. I mean, we're, one I know is the airport. We're looking at redoing the aprons and some of the areas there, so that's one. We're definitely looking at the streets. When you think about Lincoln Street and you think about, moving the downtown and those type of street around the bypass, you really have to focus in on where can we get some assistance and some help. And so that's what those grants really are going to do. And then you got the little ones that really just help us do smaller things like planting trees or grass or those type of things that, it's money out there, and our administration takes a strong look at how can we get those grants to save the bottom line.
It's always been like two schools of thought on that. You get the view from people that, well, why are you always seeking all these grants because we're paying, it just costs us more in tax money. And then there's the other side that says, well, you're already paying it. You might as well try to get back a little bit of what you paid in.
Absolutely. And, it's there. The bottom line is, use the federal grant as an example. It's there. The money's been appropriated. So, if we don't apply, it goes to another community because they're going to spend it anyway. And we'd just as soon have them spend it here in Beatrice.
Yeah. We're with Bob Morgan, Mayor of Beatrice today. I want to come back and talk a little bit about some of the goals farther down the list, just things that maybe didn't come up so much during the goal-setting session just because of the magnitude of some of the objectives you have. But we'll talk about that coming up next on KWBE. This is Ask the Mayor on KWBE with Mayor Bob Morgan today. Back to the kind of the goal-setting thing session that you had here and the few days after that. Most of the discussion on that meeting was about the Dempster building, the downtown redevelopment, streets, things like that. But I was looking down the list of some of the ones that I don't want to call them lesser goals because to the persons who proposed them, they're very important. And maybe just a few of them, say, for instance, a splash pad at Froberry Park. Some people may not know where that park is at. It's way down on the south side, right by the South Water Tower, if I remember right.
Yeah, it is. And I'll say, when you think about the I don't call them lesser goals at all. I call them interests because typically those were items that one council member versus, you look at the big ones, we had pretty much a consensus, and the rest of those were ideas that, one or two councilmen had. And so that's where you have some good discussions because there's a number of items on there that are really good, but nobody else thought about them.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where they're at. So, like the splash pad, again, is a great idea. As we all know, as we try to plan our budget, and that's why we did the goal setting in January, is because in October we're going to have a new budget. So, a lot of things we just have to figure out how do we plan and where does the money fall and what is the most important use of the dollars.
Another one on the list there, and this one was kind of in the works anyway, but trying to develop some cost share on the 33rd and Lincoln area there with the Beatrice Public Schools. How is that going? I know it's been kind of a tough thing to get at, to figure out how you're going to fund that, but where's that at right now?
Well, it's on the 1 and 6 plan, and, we'll continue to work with the school. I can tell you we really haven't worked with the school since probably right before Christmas because, again, they were very concentrated on getting the footings in and trying to get the building started. So it'll be time to come back around and have those discussions. We just haven't had them.
Is it possible that you could just, wait till the project's there and in operation a while and maybe hold off a while addressing that? Or is the condition of the streets or the traffic they will get such that you need to address it right now?
Well, I think you could do that, yes. I mean, I think you've got a couple of options, and certainly that's one of them. I mean, the hardest part of that is then trying to come back and do the street, because it may take longer than the summertime.
Yeah.
And then what does that do with the traffic impact? But, I think we have to be, cognizant of looking at all of the options that we have, and certainly that possibly could be one. The hardest part with the whole Lincoln and 33rd Street is, at one point in time, those were county roads, and so they don't have curb and gutter. And so, there's some unique challenges there. But, I'm sure that is also one of the options.
Went by that site the other day, and boy, the school, the structure's going up. I don't want to say fast, but you're seeing things there now, so people kind of have an idea where everything's going to be at.
Right. I mean, I think they made some good progress. I think we had some good weather. It's kind of been weird. We get cold weather, and then it warms up, and then we get cold weather, and then it warms up. But as far as moisture, thank goodness we've got some snow to keep everything a little moisture count. But on the other side of the coin, it's been probably a pretty good year for them to work on their building.
One other on the other interests list was develop an improvement plan for the airport. Of course, now you're under an advisory board at the airport rather than an airport authority board. And there are some needs out there, I would imagine.
Well, there are. I think overall the airport authority has done a good job. Now that it's an advisory committee, it also opens up some maybe possible funding from the city side as we look at the next 2 years' budget. I think there has been a demand, for instance, hangar space. And if you think about it, I'm not sure how long it's been since we built new hangar space. I think, we have the opportunity to continue, and I think our manager, our department head out there is doing a good job. And so I think we've got a lot of avenues we can look at how we can enhance and strengthen the airport.
I noticed the city's taking requests for proposals for that right now. Is that kind of just all-encompassing things that might be done, or is that somewhat limited in the repairs you're doing?
That's kind of a, we found ourselves with some hail damage, and we found ourselves with some older buildings. And so at the end of the day, the insurance company came up with a number of what they're going to pay us. And so, it's more than roofs. And so that's why we're doing an RFQ. It's roofs, it's sheet metal, it's siding. There's a number of crafts that are involved there. We worked with one company, but we really felt, in all fairness, we needed to put a request for qualifications out there to see, who's interested and what their qualifications are, so we get the best person for the job.
Okay. Here's an interesting one. Allow UTVs on city streets. Some would argue that on some occasions that's already being done, and it's not supposed to be done, but we've all seen them every once in a while here and there. But what about that?
That one actually is going to be on Monday night's agenda.
Is it?
There's a group of people that have gotten together and visited with a council member, so we put that on there. It'll be an interesting discussion, I'm sure. If you look at state statute, it does allow for UTVs, but again, it also allows for the city, each city to have their own rules and regulations. I think the council member that came in and visited with me, I think he said, Seward allows it. There's a number of communities around us that allow it. So with those interests or goals that had one or two people in interest, we're going to try to work through most of them. And I guess I think the best way to do that is, start at the discussion level.
Yeah.
And so that way we can know what the councilman was thinking and what interest the community has in an idea. And in this case, it typically wouldn't have any funding, but if it had funding tied to it, where would that funding come from? Yeah. So we'll start with that discussion, and that's one of the first ones we're going to start with on Monday night.
Seems like when the state first started allowing that, the focus was more on like villages or second-class cities, smaller towns where maybe it's more practical, or maybe there's not as much, I don't want to say there isn't a safety concern, but maybe not as much safety concern due to the traffic. But when you get up into first-class cities the size of Beatrice, does that become, I guess, more of a concern?
Right, and I think that's one of the good discussions that we'll have Monday night. Again, if there's traction after that discussion, we would certainly refer it to the traffic committee. I think that's always important. That would be the next step. And then we'd see it either come out and for passage after that if that's where the traction goes after tomorrow. Monday night. I was thinking tomorrow night, but no, I got a few more days to prepare, so that's good.
One more on the list I just wanted to touch on before we take a break here, and this is one that's it's kind of been out there for a while. I know I talked about it probably, I want to say 7-8 years ago at least. Is the welcome signs into Beatrice. I know it's been kind of a hard thing to get a grip on as to where do you go and how much money you spend, but where do you think you might go on that idea itself? Right
Well,
now?
I think we keep pushing. I mean, I think we're trying to find partners. I think we're still trying to find grants. They're not inexpensive, but they are needed. I mean, it's been a conversation, goodness gracious, probably 10 years.
Yeah.
And I know that that's something that needs to be done. But again, where does it fit on the scale of expenditures?
Yeah. When I go back to Iowa, where I'm from, all these towns have these similar welcome signs. There must be some state program where you can be eligible for some support to put them up. The problem with those is they all look the same. So you don't, other than the name itself, you think you're going into the same town all the time. So it doesn't really allow for a lot of creativity. But you're right. If you want to have something that really looks nice, it's not something you can just go out and spend $50 and here it is and you plop it
Right.
down and you're done with.
And let's face it, the ones we've had have served us well for a very long time. So whatever we put up, we would like to make sure that it lasts a long time. We've rebranded, of course, before that with Stake Your Claim. There's a lot of things that can be done. It's just a matter of how do you design it and fund it.
Okay. Back with more on Ask the Mayor to wrap things up today with Beatrice Mayor Bob Morgan in just a moment. Back on Ask the Mayor today with Beatrice Mayor Bob Morgan as we finish things up. A few more things to talk about today. Just here recently, you had a industry in Beatrice at the Gage County Industrial Park who has applied for tax increment financing for a building expansion, nice expansion at Accuma. I think it was, I want to say 52,000 square feet, somewhere in that range. Has to go through quite a process. It starts out with the CRA. I think the Planning and Zoning Commission has it on their agenda Monday night, then goes to the City Council. So something that you kind of have to go through a series of steps.
There are, with the tax increment financing, there are basically statutory requirements that have been passed by the legislature. It's a great project, and, it's for a company that has done really well here in Beatrice and has been a great partner for Beatrice. We're proud to have Accuma there, and we certainly are behind it and support their expansion. I think that, they've been one that has done a lot of the yeoman's work on what they do themselves. I'm not sure if they've been through a tax increment financing project
Can't
before.
recall, no.
And so, it's really kind of nice that when you have a business that's been in Beatrice as long as you have, to be able to help them with their expansion. And so I'm excited about that. And I think that's a great step forward, as we continue to work and retain the businesses that we have in the industrial park.
And it's on property they already own, just to the east of them. So it looks ready to go whenever everything is approved. But like you said, it does take a little time. I think it has to go to the council, then back to the CRA, and
then back to the council.
Yeah, and then back again for the final development plan. So.
I think the steps I think there might be 5 steps if I remember correctly.
I was trying to remember myself how many there are, but it's a pretty regulated process.
It is.
By the state of Nebraska. So, but neat addition there that's working its way through. The council will be, and I guess the Board of Public Works considered it yesterday, recommending approval on an armor coating bid. This is just basically maintenance you do on various streets every year.
Again, it's part of the 1 and 6, and this is part of the 1. The armor coating certainly gives our streets more longevity, and it's a company, Stay-Built, got the contract, construction. I think they've done work for us in the past, but they haven't for a while because they've always been one of the highest bidders, and now they were a great company with the lowest bid. So we're glad to welcome them back to Beatrice.
Seems like there's always 3 or 4 companies that get most of the road maintenance work because just their size and resources they have. But,
size, resources, reputation, and I think they must have a great plan because we're not the only community that does armor coating, and so they probably figure out how can they plan their summer, and Stay-Built might have a couple other jobs that are in the area, and so that certainly cuts down their cost, and so it must be quite a planning process for them, in December, January, thinking about where they're going to go, and because again, most of those workers, they don't live in Beatrice. They come in, they do their work, and they go home. So I'm sure it's quite a deal to put together.
They cover a very wide region of the Midwest.
They do.
Very communities there. Ask you maybe just a little bit about this. I don't know if there's been any kind of result of it, but you tried some different things besides Armor Coat. There was a process I think you tried on Market Street a while back. There was another one you tried on, a different one on Lincoln Street by the jail there for one. And how's that all sorting out as far as what's the best alternative? Or, it's kind of a street department question, but you've been looking at some things.
I think it's one that I'd probably have to talk to Jason about and see how he has evaluated them. But, he's been creative on ways to help, give our streets more longevity.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
This kind of sounds like in most cases armor coating is still kind of the best as far as...
it does.
And maybe least cost.
And least cost. I think in this case, when you put the armor cart down, you put gravel down. We're putting the gravel down so that, we've got the gravel, so that helps also reduce the cost for the city.
Okay. I was trying to remember, what are the major street projects this next year? Is it 13th? And I know you had the one by the old hospital site, which I think was held over.
Right.
Right. But I couldn't recall if there were any others that were on the list.
Without having the list in front of me, I'm afraid.
All right.
I don't know.
Fine. Didn't want to put you on the spot there because I didn't know myself.
That's okay.
Trying to figure out where that was at. So a couple other things to touch on before we wrap up today. It's kind of one of those, it would be nice to have project, but again, it kind of gets down to how does it fit into priorities, and is there private support? Is there, can it be done in another way rather than government funding? But every once in a while you hear about the waterfall project at Chautauqua Park, and the area we're talking about is kind of in the, right below where the pickleball courts are now down there as you go around that bend there. What's the situation on that as to whether or not that might come about?
Well, I believe there has been a committee that was formed for donations for the waterfall. I think there's been some cost estimates developed from our staff, and we're going to talk about it Monday night to, number one, see where that is, and number two, is there any interest from the council, and if there is, how can we assist with the project? I think it is. It's a nice thing to have. I wasn't here, but I guess at one time that was a waterfall, and now it's to rejuvenate and have that waterfall active again. And so, I think there certainly was a council member that was interested in bringing that to the council to talk about, how can we assist? What should be our responsibility in the project, and with everything, where would the funding come from?
Yeah. So there's projects like that once in a while where people remember in the old days what was here but isn't gone now, but they'd like to bring it back just for kind of the nostalgia of it or the look of it.
Well, yeah, it would be an enhancement to Chautauqua. And, one of the things that I think have been a bright spot for the city of Beatrice is our parks, our recreations, and our trails. And so it should be an interesting discussion. Again, it's one of those that was one person interest on the goal setting, and staying with kind of the tradition. We'll discuss it and see where it goes after the discussion Monday night.
As we wrap up today, maybe just a little bit of discussion about, there was some discussion at the Board of Public Works meeting yesterday about what is essentially a mandate for cities the size of Beatrice and larger, and that's how do you manage stormwater. And wasn't always that way, but now you've got several requirements out there as almost treating it as you do, sewer service and things like that. You have to account for what's going into storm sewers, what's running off in what areas. And but the bad thing about it is you don't get a lot of money to do that, to accomplish that.
Well, yeah, we really don't get any money to accomplish that. I think they said it's an MS4 plan, and every year we'll have to put in this plan. There are some cities. First of all, first-class city is anything over 10,000. So at 12,500, we're a first-class city. If you're a second-class city, you really don't have to deal with this plan. But there's a lot of regulations. We certainly cannot afford one person to manage our flood our sewer, our runoff, our runoff water. So we contracted with, I believe, JEO. And not only are they going to put us in the right place that we need to be, but also they'll help us with the annual report this year and what needs to be done. And so the following years, unless things change, which they could, we'll kind of know what the process is from the forms and the regulations, and we'll be able to kind of get a handle on it and moving forward. So they're going to assist us and provide us a roadmap so we can do it in the future.
Yeah. Before you became mayor and you were on the council, you were part of the discussion regarding, possible storm sewer system improvements. And I think of like East Beatrice, you were trying to get areas that pond up or tend to be problem areas there somehow to channel that south in some way. Where's that at right now?
I don't know. I know it's with the Board of Public Works, and I know any type of improvements we do in that area, we take a look at that. As far as the rest of it, I'm not sure.
Yeah. A lot of money to do things like that where you're trying to design a system that was designed years ago, and now you see growth around it, and things have changed as far as what runs off where.
Right, and then there's also regulations that fall into that. I mean, there's a whole, when you design a development anymore, you have to look at, retention ponds and detention ponds, and where does the water go, and how do you maintain that water. But, certainly our city engineer is versed in that and helps us with that.
Isn't local government fun with all these mandates that you have to, you're a creature of the state, and some would say the federal government too, so you gotta, in order to get support, you have to do ththings you might not otherwise do.
As you and I talked before we went on the air, it would be real interesting to know how much we have to, and it is have to spend.
Yeah.
Just with all these mandates and sites and pre-planning and, just like the $200,000 to apply for a grant that we have to do first, it would just be interesting over the last 10 years how much the city, because we got to do it the right way, how much money we spent with just mandates.
We'll see you Monday night, Bob.
All right. Thank you, Doug.